Coming to get you, Bobber.
Castle Freak is the 2020 horror movie directed by Tate Steinsiek, and it stars Claire Catherine, Jake Horowitz and Emily Sweet. Hi guys, just before I get into this review, I know it is a new movie. I'm going to be doing spoilers in this review, but at the very beginning I'm not going to tell you any spoilers. I will let you know about spoilers later on in the review. An Albanian castle with bloodthirsty creatures is inherited by a young woman. Okay, so I just done the review for the original 1995 Castle Freak, so I was up to date with the storyline because I did forget a lot about it. So I went into this one with no expectations, of course, because when I saw the trailer for it, I thought it looked like a cheap European style movie, and I wasn't wrong because I'll go into that in a minute. But this one, they changed the story slightly at the beginning, because in the first, or in the original movie, we had a family: Susan, John, Rebecca and JJ. JJ died, Rebecca was blinded. In this movie, we've only got Rebecca. She didn't have a little brother, and we don't see her parents because one of her parents is apparently one of the ones that owned this new Albanian castle. So it's not set in Italy this time, it's set in Albania. But Rebecca comes herself with her boyfriend, John. So it's the name of her original dad in the original movie. So we've got Rebecca and John, and they've got a few friends as well. I can see why they changed the story the way they did, because it's aimed more at the younger audience. When I say the younger audience, I don't mean kids. I just mean that young adults who have maybe seen Castle Freak, maybe not, but they're aiming it at the younger, maybe late teens, early 20s audience. Now from the beginning, I don't really judge a movie after the first 5 minutes, but from the beginning I hated it straight away. I hated what they were doing so far with the story, with the change up, and I also hated the characters. I mean, every character, I don't know why they've done this, but they introduced every character in a really bad light. I hated every single one of them. Not so much not so much Rebecca and John, but their friends were just annoying. The vibes I got from the opening scene, I can only compare it to a really cheap sci-fi channel movie. There was this one character called Professor, or the Professor. I don't know if he was called the Professor because he was a professor, or they called him Professor as a nickname because he's really smart. They didn't really get into that until the very end, which I'll get into at the end of this review. But this guy was completely fake. Like, everything he said, it's as if he was reading from a script right in front of his face, but he was narrating it as if he was standing tall on some sort of Macbeth or Hamlet spiel. It was just really weird.
If the pursuit of knowledge is geeking out, then yes, John, I am geeking out.
There was another girl who's not really Rebecca's friend. She just kind of floats about with the other guys, and you can tell that Rebecca doesn't like her, yet she still comes to the castle anyway to be her friend. I know that she's there because she likes John, but she's making it very obvious. During the introduction to all the characters that I hated, there was one moment that I thought, okay, this is going to get interesting, because Rebecca and John are in a car crash, just like it happened in the original one, only it's just those two this time, and Rebecca's blinded. But the way she's blinded and the way she gets out of the car was very realistic. You know, I'm not saying anyone's a bad actor in this film, but I think the standout is Rebecca herself. She was really good. She doesn't play a great blind person, because there's a few things that she does in it that I think, well, a blind person wouldn't do that, I'm assuming. But she doesn't play a really good blind person, but she's still a good actress. And at the start, just for that one scene, I thought, wow, she was really good at that. I did mention it felt like a European movie from the trailers, and I wasn't wrong. When I watched this film, it felt like a very cheap European movie, and I don't mean a movie that's set in Europe, because it is obviously set in Europe. A movie that was set in Europe, but also made and produced in Europe, and produced by European people, and no Americans were involved in the making of this movie. That's what it felt like. It felt like a really cheap back alley European movie. Now we'll quickly talk about the setting, because there's not much to talk about, which is a shame, because it's set in a castle. When you set a horror movie in a castle, you're expecting atmosphere like we saw in the original Castle Freak, but we didn't get any of that. Again, there was so many close-ups in the castle that you couldn't really tell the grand scale of it. There was one scene where she's on one of the rooftops talking to another guy, and you could tell the scope of the castle was pretty big, but that's the only scene throughout this movie, and that was set at daytime, and there was no atmosphere whatsoever. Inside the castle at night, no atmosphere. The dialogue was bad, the story was bad, there was nobody in this film I could get behind, not even Rebecca. I wanted to get behind her boyfriend at times because there was things he was doing in it that I thought, okay, he's doing the right thing, but then he goes and mucks it up again. So I think he was unrealistic. The only person that was semi-realistic was Rebecca, and even at that, I didn't care about her. There was some scenes, and I think this is part of the script, some scenes that were really bad where the castle freak was going to Rebecca and it was doing this to her. And you're like, does the castle freak know that she's blind? Because I'm sure the castle freak does know that she's blind because of certain things that happened before it, but I won't give that away. But there's just certain things in it. I'm like, are you forgetting that this woman's blind? You need to write it in the story that, remember, this girl's blind, so act like it.
Maybe this wasn't your mother's. Look at this magnificent beast.
Now I'm going to get into the spoiler territory, guys, so if you want to continue watching, then please do so. If you've seen it, please watch on, but if you haven't seen it and you don't want any spoilers, look away now. So Rebecca's getting these psychic visions all throughout the film. Every time she gets them, I just put my hand on my face because I thought, that's cheap, that's so cheesy, and I didn't like it. I was wondering why she was getting these visions anyway. Is it because she's blind and she's got this sixth sense? No, it turns out not. It turns out she's getting these visions because she has a twin sister, and it just so happens that her twin sister is the castle freak. So it's not this guy that we thought it would have been from the original. They've done a twist and it's now a woman, which is fine, but they're making it her twin. Her mum was the one that was killed at the beginning of the movie in the castle, and she was killed by the guy who pretended to be a real estate agent, and it turns out he wasn't. He was just part of these people, this cult. And it reminded me of something out of Nightbreed, this cult that we saw, because they didn't look human. They just looked like these people from Nightbreed. Is that Barbara Crampton? It looks like Barbara Crampton. If I had to give this film one positive, it was the story. Although it was bad, it kept me intrigued from the start to the end. But as the movie progressed, the things that I wanted to happen didn't happen, and the things I expected to happen did happen, and I was disappointed at every single turning point of this film. Now I'll talk about the end of the film, then I'll talk about the very end during the credit scene. The end of the film made no sense. The end of the film was completely out there, something that you wouldn't expect to see in a Castle Freak movie because of how grounded the original was. But they went way off on a tangent with this movie. It went, before the end, it went from being a really bad, below average movie to one of the worst movies I have seen in my entire life just because of that ending. Now here's the kicker. The end credit scene, the post credit scene, just made it completely worse for me because we had this professor who went back to his university. He went into an office with this Necronomicon, whatever it is, and he wanted his professor to look at it. And when he opened the door, there's somebody sitting there with their back turned, and they've got this green stuff sitting there, and he says,
Worst.
And I thought, oh my goodness, are you going to try and mix Castle Freak with Reanimator? Yes, you are. Now, Castle Freak is not, the original Castle Freak is not a masterpiece, so if you remake a film that's not amazing to start with, you're not doing any harm. You're making a silly movie, and it was a really silly movie. You're making a silly movie, and nobody gets angry. But then when you try to introduce a Reanimator movie in the same universe as this new abomination of a film, that's a no-no. It's not a big production for Castle Freak, and I'll accept that, and I'll accept the movie for what it is, but you can't have the same group of people make a remake for Reanimator with the same quality that they did in Castle Freak. That's just not going to be acceptable. Reanimator is a classic movie, and if you're going to remake a classic, I'm not against remakes. I actually like the fact that they're making remakes, whether they're good or bad. I like the fact that they made Castle Freak remake. It just turned out to be a bad movie. But if you're going to do a remake to Reanimator, you're going to have to have better people involved than the people involved in this. At the end of the day, guys, this was one of the worst horror movies I've ever seen. It was definitely the worst horror movie of the year for me. I don't know what else to say. It's just a really bad movie. If you've seen this film, guys, if you're stuck to the end of this review, please leave your comments down below and let me know if you liked this movie. If you did like it, let me know why. And also, do you prefer this one over the original? As always, guys, thanks a lot for watching. Thanks for subscribing. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.